your Bibles to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel, of course, correlates a lot with Revelation, so some of the information we're looking at tonight comes from Daniel, but his background that John uses and builds upon. So we will look at, of course, Revelation some tonight too, but our starting place will be Daniel chapter 9. Last week we began talking about the Antichrist. Who is he? What will he do? And when will he do it? And in terms of who he is, we talked about his identity. He's a resurrected man who returns to earth. Revelation chapter 17, verses 8 and 11 tell us that he is somebody who comes out of Hades, somebody who was, prior to the time that John wrote the book of Revelation, somebody that is no longer alive, John says, but somebody who will again be alive on the earth because he comes out of Hades. We said those passages are clearly talking about an individual that's being revived, not a kingdom, because kingdoms don't go to Hades. So a resurrected man, Revelation chapter 11, verse 7 as well, says that he comes from Hades. We said that he's a westerner. Daniel chapter 11 talks about the fact that he is attacked by the north, by the south, and by the east. The only direction that does not attack him is the west. Hence, by a simple process of deduction or elimination, we conclude, therefore, he's a westerner, since everybody else, the other three points of the globe attack him. Common suggestions in for his identity as somebody who lived before the time of John. There's the Roman Emperor Nero. We talked about the fact that he's a good choice for two reasons. One, he has ties to the Roman Empire, and we'll talk about the ties of the Roman Empire to the Antichrist in the future. But secondly, because the letters of his name in Hebrew add up to 666. So the Latin would be Nero Caesar. You put it into Greek, it's Nero Kaiser, and like Nero Kaiser in Hebrew as well, so it adds up to 666. Now, I just kind of jumped past this last time. I don't think I talked about this, but if you take the Latin spelling, which does not have a final N there, so rather than Nero Kaiser, you just get Nero Kaiser, then you're going to have, boy, that went fast. Like it just through a bunch of them. You're going to have one last letter here on the end, and it's going to be a letter that's worth 50 points, a final N, and so you get 616. I just mentioned that because there's just a handful of ancient Greek manuscripts that have 616 written out as the number. And so if you've ever heard about that and wondered about that, well, there are a few manuscripts that say 616. Both add up to the name Nero, and they said there was a popular thought that it was Nero, so it's a matter of if you're using the Latin spelling and just converting it into Hebrew letters, or if you actually spell it as they would in Hebrew. When I said if you spell it as they would in Hebrew, you're going to get this 666. But it would be the same name. But nobody really believes that 616 is the correct, even though it still adds up to Nero. No one believes that is correct for two reasons. Number one, most of the manuscripts actually spell it out, the early manuscripts. I said rather than using that numbers, and all the ones that have it spelled out clearly have it spelled out as 666. Secondly, because again, the point is it's the number of a man, and it would be a threefold idea of a man, 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 but you don't get that with 616, you only get that with 666. So, but in case you've ever heard that well, his number is actually 616, because I could see you running across something like that on the internet and somebody trying to make a lot out of that. There's really nothing to that. We talked about the idea that it does not represent the name for Allah, although some have tried to say that. Then the other good suggestion is the Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes, who lived in a couple hundred centuries before the time of Christ. And he's a very good option based on the teaching of Daniel in Daniel chapter 11. Some suggest Judas Iscariot. So that's the identity of the Antichrist. Now, tonight, we move on to discuss his rise to power, which takes place during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period. At the time of the rapture, the beginning of the 7 years, he's got to be somebody that has some kind of influence and power in the globe, but he doesn't necessarily, it has to be the most powerful man in the world at that point. That's when he's going to really begin grabbing power and seizing power. So he'll be presumably a somebody at the time of the rapture, but it's going to take to the midpoint before he really gets to the point that he has the kind of power that he's been seeking. Well, even there, he's not going to be quite as successful as he would like, but his big power grab is at the midpoint. So most people think of the Antichrist right from the beginning of the tribulation as being this world dictator, but there really is the 3.5 years of his getting there. Now, the first thing that he does that really gets our attention is that he is the one who signs a covenant with the Jewish nation. The Bible doesn't say the nature of the covenant, but presumably it is some kind of peace deal. That's what most would assume that it is, some kind of peace deal that he negotiates with the Jewish people and presumably in the Middle East, perhaps with some of their neighbors and the rest of the world. Now that is specifically referenced in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. Daniel 9, verse 27. And this is talking about the Antichrist here. And it's in Daniel's prophecy of the 70 periods of 7 years. And we get down to the final period of 7 years, and that would be the tribulation period. Week is the word used in the King James Version, week, but it really means just a period of 7. Okay? And we know it's a period of 7 years. So verse 27 then says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week," that is 1 period of 7 years. "And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." Now you note here that it says that he'll confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. The context of this passage is the Jewish people. The 70 weeks relates specifically to the Jewish people. So we understand this contextually as being many of the Jewish people. And it perhaps involves the Jewish people with other people, maybe other nations in the Middle East. But the centerpiece, the focus of it would be the Jewish people. So this is the first significant thing that the Antichrist does in prophecy. So whatever he does before that, in gaining some national recognition, we don't know, and the Bible doesn't talk about it. But again, like I said, to be able to negotiate a treaty, he already has to be a somebody, but he doesn't have to be a world dictator. He's somebody that the world is starting to listen to. And like I said, if he can do what nobody else has done in the Middle East, presumably get peace, that catches the world's attention. And so this is the first thing that he does there. Then he seeks to grab power. Having signed this peace treaty, the first thing he starts doing is working for power. That would be what's being referred to in Revelation chapter 6. If you look at Revelation chapter 6 and verse 2, we get to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. This is actually part of that first series of judgments, the 7 seal judgments. And the first 4 seals are really the 4 horsemen. So when the first seal is opened, Revelation 6:2 says, "And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer." So you've got this rider on the white horse, he's going forth to conquer. So he wants power. Now who is the rider on the white horse? Now John does not explicitly tell us, but I'm going to suggest that the most likely candidate that he's referring to here would be the Antichrist. So again, we can't 100% know that, but if it's not the Antichrist, who else would it be? Other than some people misunderstand, because this rider is riding a white horse, some people would want to identify that with Christ. Well, if he's riding a white horse, isn't he a good guy? Well, the Antichrist is a deceiver. He's going to try to be a good guy, right? If he signs a peace treaty in the Middle East, what's he doing to grab power? He's trying to use peace. Now, eventually, of course, he'll turn against the policy of peace, and so he'll be doing other things as it goes along. So the point is, he wants power. So this is likely the Antichrist posing as a good guy, because there's no reason that this would be Christ. It doesn't really seem to make any kind of sense. Right here at the beginning of the tribulation period, Christ going forth to conquer. Christ comes at the end of the tribulation to conquer. But during the tribulation, he's not interested in conquering so much as he is interested in just judging sin. Not conquering the peoples of the world, but judging them. And there's a difference. So he'll conquer at the end of the tribulation when he comes again. So it makes no sense at all to see this as Christ. So if it's not Jesus, it's a bad guy pretending to be a good guy. Kathy, you had a question?
Do you think any of this symbolic, or are they gonna, I guess they're gonna be riding around on white horses?
Well, no, I would take that as symbolic. That's John putting it in first century language and terminology that you got these different kinds of horses. Yeah, you know, the horse again is going to represent the power. The power is associated with royalty and king. So this is somebody with power, seizing power, more power, conquering yet more. And the color white is suggestive again that he's presenting himself as a good guy, but he's so a powerful king who portrayed himself as good, but who's really all about conquering.
I don't know why I had this thought, but Trump's son-in-law that was over in the Middle East and almost got the peace treaty. You know, he looks like that guy that I mean, I'm like, he looks like him. I think he comes, Trump gets reelected, he goes over there and gets a peace treaty, and we're all going to start getting scared.
Yeah, I mean,
they almost got a peace treaty. I mean, he was one of the
Jewish, isn't he?
and he's
Yes.
Jewish. And
Yes,
you think he's going to be
yes,
someone
he's-
Jewish.
he's Jewish, and so yes, I mean, you know. So Americans look at you know, the Trump
He's a Westerner.
yes, as being very supportive of the Jews, and so being good guys in their foreign policy in terms of supporting Israel. Well, I said that, you know, who knows, somebody from that
Who
family
knows
could,
what she married?
so we just don't know. But yeah, that could be part of the deception. Now, remember, we said Antiochus Epiphanes last time is a good option. I think he's a very good choice for being the one who's resurrected and comes back as Christ. And Daniel 11 specifically told us that he came in peaceably at the beginning. Used a lot of flattery, comes in peaceably. Now that's what he did in history. And that's what the Antichrist presumably is doing again. And that's why, again, there's going to be the significance to the white horse there. The idea that there's the flattery, there's the idea of peace, that goes in with signing the covenant. So the 70 weeks, that is the 7-year tribulation, officially begins with the covenant, though. That's when the clock starts. That's when we start counting the 7 years. And so once the 7 years start clicking, he starts immediately going forth to gain and consolidate power. And it will be by the midpoint that he has now achieved the power that he seeks. Yes?
So, did Antiochus Epiphanes come in on a white horse and establish a treaty with the Jews like that?
I don't know what color of horse he rode. I would have to, I don't know if we know that. Yes, I don't know. That's a good question. But it would be interesting if he did actually ride a white horse. I'll have to look into that and see if we know what
But
color
it
horse.
wouldn't happen, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, no. But the same technique of using peace.
So we won't see the peace, though. We'll be raptured out, basically, as they're signing the, I mean, it starts the tribulation. I mean, we're raptured out probably the time this is getting.
Yeah, right at the time, yeah, presumably, because again, the clock starts ticking with that because he says the beginning of that final 70th week.
And we were raptured out at the
signs
beginning
the
of the
covenant.
tribulation.
And it seems to be saying, yeah, that's what ticks off the clock for the 7 years. So we're going to be raptured just before they can sign the covenant. Now,
So we won't see
again,
it.
are we going to see a little stage setting? Is there's an announcement? There's going to be this covenant signed, next week or
we
2
will.
weeks,
We don't know.
and then then we would know what the rapture going to happen sometime in the next 2 weeks because this peace treaty. But of course we wouldn't know for sure. That's the covenant that Daniel was talking about. But I mean, you could
Or as they said, you
make an educated guess.
breaks down at the last minute.
The other thing is, Paul in the New Testament seems to associate the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation period very closely. In theory, it is possible that there is a gap. In other words, the rapture happens before the tribulation period. But is there a slight transition period? There could be.
Like a month, a year.
But if there is, it's probably not very long, because based upon Thessalonians, again, Paul's teaching where he describes the rapture is that when we're taken out of here, the world is caught off guard by that whole thing, and we're suddenly in the day of the Lord. They're suddenly in the day of the Lord, and it caught them off guard like a thief in the night. So it's hard to see a very long gap in there, and that's why most people kind of say the rapture happens, and but it is also hard to see a big, signing ceremony that catches the attention of the world without any kind of advance notice. So if we're all believers, we're watching the news, and there's about to be a big peace treaty signed. I get pretty excited that, like if that treaty is due to be signed like next week, I'd be saying sometime this week, the rapture may be happening type
We
of
need to
thing.
get packed up.
So at that point, of course, no man throughout the last 2,000 years could know the day. We still might not know the exact, but we can say it's probably going to happen within the next week, so we can know pretty closely once you're at that point, you know. Yeah.
After the rapture, are we going to be able to see what's happening on Earth, or are we going to be at the point where it doesn't matter what's happening down
Well, our technology isn't good enough to be able to get cable up there, so probably, probably not. Probably not. No, I don't think so. Unless we get some reports. But the general rule is that when we move on from this world, we don't know what's going on in this world.
Because we'd be sad.
Ecclesiastes kind of stressed that type of thing. That once you move on, your share of your part in this world is done, and you no longer know. You don't have any knowledge of what's going
But there are
on.
going to be people getting killed, saved, and killed coming up, and
I suppose, right, you might be able to get firsthand, hey, tell me what's going on Earth. So, but I don't get the sense that we'll see it. So, yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you wouldn't have that. On the other hand, the Bible tends to stress that we just, we're not, maybe nobody's talking about it. So once you get there, you may find that you're totally uninterested, though it's hard to
but it's hard to believe that because he brings back the dead martyrs and the stuff and the things, and we celebrate the people that have taken.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's hard to believe we're not interested.
Yes, it's hard to believe that we wouldn't be either.
But
So
we're not gonna be sad, but I guess if our loved ones are saved, but if we have unsaved loved ones, we'd be sad to hear they were killed.
yeah,
Wouldn't we?
yeah.
So,
So
but God will take care of it.
yeah, so we just can't know on that thing.
there? I think we're going to have a CNN instead of a news network. It's a crisis news network.
Yeah, the
It
crisis.
goes out through somebody comes up to heaven and new report.
Crisis
So,
news.
But so anyway, yeah, if there is a gap, it would be short. Traditionally, we don't stress there being a gap because 1 Thessalonians really doesn't seem to allow much of a gap there because the rapture seems to be the thing that sets everything into motion that has caught the world off guard like a thief in the night. So it seems like there's not a long gap.
Well, do you think if some of the people who are on Earth will they be aware of this and they'll know that what's happening maybe,
People that are the elect, if they're not elect, they won't. It would only be people that are destined to get saved at one point that's why they won't take the mark of the beast. So there will be people that will know what's going on, but they're either saved or destined to get saved. If they're not among the elect, they will be taken in by the deception, every one of them. So it is a worldwide deception. So anyway, like I said, we can't know for sure the rider and the white horse because John doesn't elaborate any more upon him. But it's pretty hard to see well, who else would he be? If it's not Jesus, it's a bad guy. What other bad guy is going forth to conquer early on, other than the Antichrist? Then a key component is that he establishes and creates this 10-nation or 10-power confederation. So one of the things that helps him consolidate his power is that he gets these 10 powers behind him. That's referenced in Revelation 17. If you look at Revelation chapter 17, verses 12 and 13. Revelation 17, verses 12 and 13. And this is where John is interpreting part of the vision that John sees. So there's some symbolism earlier in the chapter, and this is just where he's given the interpretation of what he has seen, this beast with 10 horns. And so we want to notice how he interprets the 10 horns. Horns in the Old Testament, again, remember what we said the first week, that we interpret the symbols through the lens of the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, a horn is consistently a symbol for power. Okay? So when we see 10 horns, in other words, we know it's 10 powers, but we don't even have to guess that because he tells us. So Revelation 17, 12 and 13. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So you've got 10 kings, and again, kings and kingdoms go together in prophecy. They are virtually synonymous, the king and his kingdom. And so obviously the kings are the leaders, but if they're throwing their weight support behind them, that means their countries are as well. So 10 world leaders, verse 13 very clear, they all have one mind, and they all agree to give all their strength and their power to the beast. The beast here again is the Antichrist. He's consistently called the beast in Revelation. So this is where he gets a lot of power, when he gets these 10 standing behind him. Now, John tells in verse 12 that they are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet. 10 powers that did not exist at the time John wrote Revelation. And you see how he contrasts this again with the Antichrist. The Antichrist, he's already telling us the time that he writes, that's somebody who was and is not now and who will be again. But these 10 kings, they're not like the Antichrist. They're not resurrected individuals. He may even be talking about their kingdoms, that they are nations that didn't exist. A lot of, nations have come into existence that didn't exist back in John's day. Right? So nations that don't now exist, kingdoms that don't now exist, he's saying, but will exist. So again, it's hard to know whether he means the individuals. Obviously, the individuals hadn't yet been born in the first century, but maybe he means even their nations as nations, because they would be modern nations that exist. But 10 powers. So then, what are these 10 powers? And there are two options. Just if we were to look at world events that come to mind, one could be some kind of European Union. Now, of course, the current European Union has significantly more than 10 nations. So the European Union as it now stands, but this would have to be some kind of coalition or a new union of European nations, either pulling out of the current European Union or remaining in there, but also forming a coalition and throwing their support behind the Antichrist. But remember again, the Antichrist is a Westerner. Presumably these 10 powers that support him would be as well. So good options is that these are Western powers, perhaps Western nations, European nations, or perhaps the United States might be one of, maybe some European nations, but then maybe Canada and the U.S., for example, might be in there. So it could be something like that. So going to what you were saying earlier, Jamie, if Trump gets reelected, he might stand behind the son-in-law, but it turned out they're the son-in-law. There's no way of knowing. So it could be 10 European nations, but like I said, we've got a lot of new nations in the West, and that might be, if there's a role for the United States, it might be a little kind of a sub-role like that the U.S. throws its support behind the Antichrist. Again, because he comes forth as a kind of a savior of the West. He comes forward as the man who is for peace. He's the guy who gets peace in the Middle East. And so America, again, is standing behind this guy and supporting him, type of thing. So probably primarily, if not entirely, European. That's one idea. On the screen, a couple images. You can see the statue here, and on the cover of a German magazine here, you actually have a woman riding a beast, which does make you wonder if there's not an allusion here to the book of Revelation. Now, it could just be an allusion to ancient German mythology, the goddess Europa riding a bull. So are they looking back to their own German mythology, as Hitler once did, very much, and Hitler going back and pagan mythology? Or are they kind of really, isn't it just kind of a slap in the face to God, just boldly asserting, an identity with the woman on the beast? So it does kind of make you wonder, isn't it? And the reason why I say that is we also have this artwork. This is a poster representing the European Union. And on the poster you can see this building under construction that's not complete. And you see how much this building on the poster looks like this famous painting of the Tower of Babel. They are very obviously and deliberately in the European Union as it now stands, though it has more than 10 nations, as we said, is obviously representing themselves as the new Babel. And they even boldly say down here, if that print's large enough for you to read it, but it says down here, Europe, many tongues, one voice. So again, it's definitely, intended to be blasphemous. Well, we might speak with many languages, because of Babylon, but we're still united. We're still united in our rebellion against God, and we stand together against Him. So, yeah, I can definitely see it being entirely European nations, 10 European nations, or at least primarily, because you do see this. So that's just a couple examples of stuff coming out of Europe that it's not even subtle. It's not even subtle. The building in Brussels, you see the design of it. Again, this is an iconic representation of the unfinished Tower of Babel. Again, so they've actually built the building that way. So, European Union. One other idea that strikes some people is that these 10 powers are not individual nations, but actually 10 regions of the world, that the world will be divided up into 10 regions according to the map that you see. Each region then would, of course, have kind of a governor who represents that. So it would be these 10. But if this was the case, then the Antichrist has the entire globe under him for a while. At any rate, for a while. Because he starts out with 10. Well, a few of them will turn on him and betray him. Again, now that's very important to remember, because I think in the popular mind, everyone thinks of the Antichrist as this almost all-powerful being that has the entire world under his thumb. That is not the biblical picture. He's a very powerful ruler who wants the entire world under his thumb. Okay? But he's a man. Only God has the entire world under his thumb. Okay? Because people have a free will. And only God, as we see on Sunday mornings working through the book of Deuteronomy, God is so sovereign, His sovereignty extends even to the human heart. Right? But there is no earthly king that can make such a claim. Jesus, remember what we're told in the Gospels? That He didn't need anybody to tell Him what was in men, because He knew. He knew their thoughts. He knew what the Pharisees were thinking. And He didn't need anybody to tell them. But not even the Antichrist. Not even the Antichrist. So he would aspire to having that kind of power. But ultimately he'll never achieve it. Like I said, there will be a lot of people who won't take his mark. Of the 10 who signed up with him at the beginning, 3 are going to turn on him. So he's trying to keep it together, but he can't. So I myself tend to lean more toward the idea of 10 individual nations, like European nations, or maybe the U.S. and Canada if we're getting far west, although I primarily do tend to think of a European orientation. And like I said, the art suggests that. But some people have suggested this idea, and then you have 3 of these regions. It would be 3 of these regions that would turn against the Antichrist. And if they were big regions like number 5 and number 10, for example, and number 7, well, that's north, south, and east. And they would all be given a problem because there's a lot of population and the power represented by regions 5, 7, and 10. You're getting the Middle East, you're getting Russia, 10, you're getting China in those 3 regions. So those could be the 3 of the 10 that turn on him, and then you can still have that. So if it's European, you can see Russia and China and the Middle East fighting against him. But even if we went with this scheme, you can kind of see that as a possibility. Now, this isn't just a made-up map that some Bible scholar dreamed up. This map actually is what was designed by the Club of Rome back some over 50 years ago. So again, that's a group of world leaders. And more than 50 years ago, they dreamed up this idea that they were going to unite the world and divide it into 10 regions. So whether that will actually happen or come to fruition or not.
Green over, and then a little green there, that seems.
And it's a different green. That's a light. Number 4 and number 1. There are 2 different greens.
No, the
4.
So 4 are separate.
Oh, yes.
That seems to.
Yeah, you're getting South Africa and you're getting Australia here.
That's weird.
Yeah. So,
Separate.
yeah, that's an interesting combination, I guess, because they're both so south.
I think if they did it 50 years ago, they would have been very closely related socially and...
Well, yeah, South Africa speaking English, and Australia speaks English. Like I said, it's very different because of the influence. Like I said, they're going to be English speaking, so that may have been what they were thinking there.
But that's just an idea.
So, yes, but like I said, it's not out of clear blue sky. I mean, this is the map that the Club of Rome drew up. It was their goal to do this. So, I mean, you can see the European Union and their blasphemy. They're very blasphemous on a lot of stuff that they do. But then you've got the Club of Rome coming up with this. So, what it will actually be, we don't know. But this is his power base. So it's not just a man. He's a man who's got nations standing with him and supporting him and giving them the credibility and the military that he needs to go forth and to conquer. And then one more key element to his power during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation is that he maintains a working relationship with Mystery Babylon. That's described in Revelation 17 as well. If you back up to verses 3 through 8, Revelation 17, 3 through 8. It says, "So he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell in the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is." So bottom line, you get the vision of this woman riding a beast. Well, now who is the beast? Well, verse 8 tells us that's the Antichrist. That's the one that was and is not, but comes out of Hades. So that's a person, that's an individual, not a kingdom. That's our resurrected Antichrist. But the woman then is affiliated with the beast. Now, like I said, the individual and the king is closely associated in biblical prophecy. So the woman would be tied to the Antichrist, but that would mean then that the woman is tied into his kingdom as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But the point is then, is we see that this woman, who is called Babylon, or the Mystery Babylon, has this working relationship with the Antichrist, or vice versa, however you want to word that. Now, in the future, we'll talk more specifically about Babylon again, going ahead. But this Babylon, again, it's not the literal Babylon of history, which of course fell and destroyed and is nothing but ruins that have been dug up in the modern era by archaeologists. Saddam Hussein had a dream of rebuilding Babylon. That didn't get far. Okay, so that never happened. So no, it was never rebuilt and made into a modern city. So some Bible scholars do see the reference to Babylon as the literal Babylon, but since that Babylon no longer exists, we're going to have a whole city built before these prophecies come to fruition. It usually takes a while to get a city up and going, so that would be a pretty big endeavor if you held that. But I do not believe he's talking about the literal city of Babylon. It's because he specifically tells us here this is a mystery. This Babylon is a mystery. Well, there's no mystery to historical Babylon. We know exactly what it is, where it is, and so there's nothing really mysterious there. And the fate and the fortunes of Babylon were prophesied in great detail by Jeremiah chapters 50 and 51. So, a mystery in the New Testament would be something that we would not know and could not know about unless God told us and revealed it by divine revelation. So Paul gives us some mysteries that he reveals. For example, the idea that there would be the church, the body of Jews and Gentiles in one body, was a mystery. Jews in the Old Testament did not know that someday Jews and Gentiles would be spiritually united in one body. So that was a mystery because we didn't know it. God just kind of sprung that on us. So what he's saying here is that there is a form of Babylon that is a mystery. Of course, now we are getting divine revelation about it, but the fact that it's a mystery form of Babylon is telling us it's not the Babylon that we all would know about simply from history. Okay. The point is, it takes this revelation from John. And were it not for this revelation from John, we wouldn't know about this Babylon.
Could it possibly be Rome?
Well, that's where I'm heading with that. Rather than being the literal historical Babylon, this is a spiritual concept, and I associate it with the city of Rome as a physical base. Let me say, more particularly, though the emphasis is not so much upon the physical location at this point, as it is a religious system. So what he is maintaining a working relationship with is an apostate religious system that I think will be based at Rome, but it's the religious system that is the focus here that he's interested in and that he's working with. So yes, based in Rome, but it is an apostate religious system. And of course, what you can imagine, I mean, already there's so much apostasy, and you know, even in what goes under the name of, you know, a Christian church anymore around the world. Can you imagine when the rapture happens, and all the Christians are taken out, and then, you know, you just got individuals getting saved, but these individuals are, you know, they're trying to, you know, lie low. You know, they're not in any kind of, you know, known and established and recognized churches in society now. You know, that's not going to be happening during the tribulation period. You know, these are going to be underground churches, and type of thing, most likely. So, any, you know, recognized religion, it's kind of like in China today, right? The registered church, what they call the three-self church in China. It's not a gospel, that's a preaching church. That's why China's okay with it. It's not a Bible preaching church. So the Chinese are okay. If you want to attend the three-self church, they're okay with that. But if you want to attend one of those underground evangelical churches, they'll shut that church down, they'll drag you off to jail. Okay. So we're talking here about an apostate religious system, and like I said, without any influence of true believers, any kind of formal religion or denomination that, you know, has identified with Christianity or anything else, you can see is 100% apostate. Because every church and denomination consists 100% of unsaved people at that point. People who are deceived, like I said, and are going to be, you know, working with the Antichrist. So that's the point. So one of the deceptive things that the Antichrist does is he uses religion. Religion that is recognized by the world, but it is apostate. Now it may have a broad ecumenical flavor to it. That's something that cooperates with other world religions. But clearly it's going to be something still that also identifies itself as Christianity. That's what's going to make it so apostate. Because it's something that will claim to believe in what the Bible teaches, and yet doesn't believe anything of what the Bible teaches. Okay, so you really couldn't characterize, for example, you couldn't characterize Hinduism as apostate. Never at any time did Hinduism ever claim belief in Jesus or the Bible, right? So they're not apostate. This is something that's going to be apostate, that will depart from the historic faith of Christianity. So it may become very ecumenical, but again, I think based in Rome and with a strong Christian presence there that kind of represents it, and then in the name of Christ, reaching out and recognizing, you know, well, all religions really love Jesus type of thing. So I said that would be part of his deception, that he's going to be using religion. So these 4 points really would kind of get us through the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. This is what he's doing. He's grabbing power. He creates this 10-nation confederation that gives him that power, and then he's working with this religious system that is based in Rome. And as I said, all of that is deception. Now, once we get to the middle of the tribulation period now, 3.5 years down, he has now reached the zenith of his power. And there are several events, key events, that are associated with the midpoint of the tribulation and this zenith of power. So this is why, as you work through Revelation, you'll see there is a pretty big pause, a lot of dramatic pause, a lot of stage setting, in the middle of the book, where we are exactly at the midpoint of the tribulation, because this is where we are now, and it's showing us all these significant things that are going to happen at the midpoint, and then endure through the remaining 3.5 years. So, because they start at the midpoint, this is when those things are introduced to us. So it's not a violation of the chronological sequence. It's saying, at the midpoint, this begins. And I said, it may endure for the whole second half. So he sets in motion a lot of things. Now, the first thing that he will do at the midpoint is he will invade Israel. Again, we get this from Daniel. If you look back at Daniel chapter 11. Now, we started tonight earlier, Daniel chapter 9, where it says he makes that 7-year covenant. Daniel 9 verse 27 also tells us that in the middle of the week, he's going to break that covenant. So, this is where we are. He made the peace treaty, but now he's going to break it because he's going to invade the very people that he made the covenant with. Chapter 11 verse 41 tells us this, that he shall enter also into the glorious land, that's Israel, the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So, he moves in on Israel, takes over Israel. Jordan escapes. So basically, the east of the Jordan River, he's not going to get control. That's what it's saying. Edom, Moab, and Ammon, that would be the modern day country of Jordan. And of course, the Jordan River does make the border there. You get the river, you look across, and you're looking into Jordan. So he's going to invade Israel, but only west of the river. He's not going to be able to take over Jordan. But he does get in, and he enters the land. And when he invades, he is successful, so he's able to move his capital to Jerusalem. Verse 45 tells us that, here in Daniel 11, verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. And he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So he plants the tabernacles of his palace. And where does he do it? In the glorious holy mountain. The glorious holy mountain would be Mount Zion. In other words, Jerusalem. So explicitly telling us that he will invade, and then Jerusalem becomes his new capital. So again, he's a Westerner. So prior to this point, he's been somewhere in the West, operating out of Europe with a European base. Maybe he was based in Rome because he had a convenient working relationship with the religious system based in Rome. So it is very possible that Rome was his headquarters. We don't know where his headquarters was prior to this point, but he's coming from the West, and it's somewhere in the West. So the Bible never explicitly says, it only says that he has this working relationship with Rome. Where his headquarters is, it doesn't say. So Rome is a good possibility, though. But wherever it was, at the midpoint, he has now changed it to Jerusalem. Now, when he invades Israel, he has control, and Jerusalem is under his control. A number of things that he does, all of this, like I said, is at the midpoint. One of the first things he does is he kills the 2 witnesses. Look at Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11. Verses 7 through 12. Revelation 11, 7 through 12. Revelation 11, 7 through 12. If we get time, we'll talk a little bit about the 2 witnesses, but I say these witnesses are 2 Jewish witnesses that have been ministering for the last 3.5 years, based there in Jerusalem, right at the temple. I believe the 2 are Moses and Elijah, who will come back. So they're going to be resurrected and come back. So just as the Antichrist is a resurrected individual, Moses and Elijah are also going to be resurrected, obviously, since they're both dead, and come back, and they will minister. But the 3.5 years, that brings us to the end of their testimony. So this is where we pick up in verse 7. It says, and when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit, that's the Antichrist, shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom in Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So you know it is Jerusalem. And they of the people, and kindreds, and tongues, and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered them, and they stood upon their feet. And great fear fell upon them which saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. So here he kills the two witnesses, Moses and Elijah. Their dead bodies lie there for 3.5 days, after which God resurrects them, and they ascend on to heaven because their testimony is done. But again, you see the power that God is giving them. Obviously, the Antichrist could not be killing Moses and Elijah if God didn't want them to. Just as Moses had the power over Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh was the most powerful man in the world at the time of Moses with this massive army. And obviously, Pharaoh could not prevail over Moses. I mean, Moses, with just Aaron's rod, right, was able to defeat this powerful Pharaoh. But it is because God gives him the power to do that. God will also give him power to kill other Christians as well. But he kills them. So again, I said this is exactly at the midpoint. So they were ministering for the first 3.5 years. You'll note that they stayed dead for 3.5 days. That may seem to be kind of odd. Why not just 3 days or a couple of days? Why 3.5 days? I think there is some symbolism there. After 3.5 days, these two key Jews, Jewish witnesses, two of the greatest prophets in Israel's history, come back to life. I believe this is kind of what we could call an enacted prophecy. It's a picture that represents the ultimate destiny of the Jewish nation. That in 3.5 years, 3.5 days representing 3.5 years, because remember exactly at the midpoint, that in 3.5 years the Jewish nation is going to come to life. Because at the end of the tribulation period, all the Jews will get saved, and Jesus will return and secure the land for them, and so they will finally be in the land as a sovereign nation, all of the land, in peace and saved. They'll be saved and in full possession of the land with their King Jesus ruling over them. So I think that's why they're dead 3.5 days. I think it's ultimately it's a sign. 3.5 years, in 3.5 years, the Jewish nation is going to be resurrected. So that's something that he does, again, though, once he invades. Now, what else does he do at this point? Well, this is when he defiles the temple. We started out again with Daniel 9:27. It said he'll sign the peace treaty for 7 years, but in the middle of the 7 years he'll break the treaty. What Daniel 9:27 said that he would do is that he would do this terrible, abominable thing. Then that would lead to desolation for the Jewish people. So that event is called the abomination of desolation in Scripture. That's what Jesus calls it, the abomination of desolation. That same expression, you may recall, was used with regard to the ancient Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes committed an act that Daniel calls the abomination of desolation, which was when he defiled the Jewish temple by putting an idol of Zeus in the temple. So Antiochus did the abomination of desolation, putting up an idol. The Antichrist, at the midpoint of the tribulation period, is going to defile the temple just as Antiochus did. And how will he do so? Well, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, I think, gives us the details. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now here Paul is not giving us exact timing, but I think based upon the other scriptures we can realize that he's talking about the abomination of desolation. So he's describing what's going to happen at the midpoint. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4, again, is speaking of the Antichrist. And it says, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And so he is going to declare himself to be God. That will be the abomination of desolation. As he goes in there and declares himself to be God. And of course, there are all the ramifications of that. Now, along with this claim, he will have a lot of power from Satan that kind of back up the claim in the eyes of the world. Paul continues to talk about that in verse 8 and following. Verse 8 and following. It says, "Then shall that wicked," or that is wicked one, "be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, and that they all might be damned, who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." And so there is this claim that he is God, and verses 8 through 10 here talks about the fact that he's going to be able to perform all these power and signs and lying wonders, because Satan is going to empower him to do these miracles. So he makes the claim, and he performs miracles to back up doing supernatural things. And I take it pretty much at face value that he'll be working what we would consider miracles. I mean, obviously technology will play a part in the end times. It's an important part of our world. But what the Antichrist is going to do is something that exceeds any technology that we know about or could even envision, such that people would look at that and say, there's something to this. Right now, with all the talk about UFOs, they're saying, the way these UFOs that we keep saying, that's representing technology that we don't know anything about. We can't imagine anybody on Earth having that kind of technology to create any kind of flying object that can fly with those speeds and make those turns. And so, they are now seeing things that they're saying that we can't explain with all of our modern technology. Well, that's going to be stepped up. There will be a lot of things that the Antichrist will do that no amount of technology can explain. So we're not talking about what's done with computers and in the cloud. We're talking actual miracles, like Pharaoh's magicians did. Remember when Moses came before him and turned his rod into a serpent. And the book of Exodus tells us that Pharaoh's magicians did the same with their rods. It's not telling us they did a magic trick. It's not telling us that they deceived Moses. It says they turned their rods into serpents. I take it at face value, that they literally turned their rods into serpents. So that was not a trick. That was not an illusion. That was a miracle that Satan empowered them to do. That's just a small scale example. And if God allowed Pharaoh's magicians to do that, what will he allow Satan to empower the Antichrist to do when he sets them up for the big delusion? And then, of course, the passage does tell verse 11, God will send them strong delusion so that they'll believe this lie that he is God.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because Moses did his first, and then they did what is good. But we just had two witnesses that they're celebrating partying, but man, they did get up and walk off, and they're stunned with a miracle that they can't. Oh, and he comes right back and does a couple of miracles. Oh, wait, no, just like the Pharaohs, his magicians kind of came in just right. Oh, we can do it too. Don't get distracted.
Yeah, right. And even though his, serpent ate up theirs, Pharaoh still
was enough to satisfy their unbelief.
Oh yeah. So God's going to give them, because they want to believe a lie, and this is why He's going to permit Satan to do this. But I think that's important, because I think most people think of this end time stuff all in terms of technology. And that's not what the Bible is telling us. I mean, we're operating on a spiritual warfare. This is spiritual realm. This isn't just technology. Yeah.
So what temple is he going to defile? Yeah. So there's no temple there, right?
The third temple that will be built. Obviously, there's going to be a temple built, because it is assumed that there's a temple.
On the same spot, on the same mountain?
It doesn't say exactly where it's going to be built, other than identified with Jerusalem. It will be there from the beginning, because that's where Moses and Elijah are based throughout that first 3.5 years. So the temple will be there again from the beginning of the tribulation period. So either it's built immediately and very quickly at the beginning, or again, we would see it built before the rapture. And that's why, a lot of people say, well, we see that temple being built. Wherever they build it, We don't know if it's going to be built on that temple, on that Temple Mount or not. There is some debate and dispute, and mostly people do agree that where the modern Mosque of Omar is where Solomon's temple was. Some people argue, although I don't think they've made a compelling case, that actually Solomon's temple was a little further south than that. But again, I think they're just arguing that because that enables them to envision a spot where the temple could be built today without having any clash with the Muslims. So to be built on that spot, obviously that mosque is going to have to go, or be built at least in the courtyard there next to it, but up there on that mountain. Obviously there's plenty of space to build a temple there next to the Mosque of Omar. So, maybe we would get some kind of ecumenical kind of thing again. The Muslims, that would be pretty incredible. You get some guy getting the Muslims, talking to Muslims, and letting the Jews build a temple on the mount right next to the mosque. Would be pretty incredible, but I could see that happening. But if we see it happen, yeah, I'd start looking up, because the rapture's probably getting really, really, really close.
There's a group there that are working on the things to put in the new temple. They have a menorah and they have various other things that would be needed in a temple like that.
Yes, definitely. They are there. They've got the stuff and the plans and everything, so that they just need the opportunity to do it. Maybe a few weeks ago, I mentioned that I wrote to them. I just kind of asked them, why are you wanting to build this temple? Because, for me, it's kind of exciting because it means we're in the end times. If we get that temple built, we're in the end times, and that's exciting. But for the Jewish people, it's not a good thing. I mean, the temple you build, you realize the temple you build is the one that's going to be defiled by the Antichrist, who is going to initiate a genocide against the Jewish people. I don't really know why you're so excited about building this thing. What exactly, are you thinking you're going to accomplish? It's the fourth temple that King Messiah is going to build. That I'd be excited about. But this is one you're talking about building, not the one Messiah is going to build. So, needless to say, they never wrote back.
Well, Christians want to build it though, because they think it will.
Just because, we get closer to the rapture. As I said, there's a sense in which it's exciting for me as a Christian, but it's also sad because I know what it means. If you don't know prophecy, you might get all excited. I said, look, we're in the land, and now we've got our temple. We've made peace with the Arab nations surrounding us. They're all thinking this is great. As a Christian who's prophet, saying this is terrible. This is terrible for you. And let's bring the Jews home. Let's bring them home to the home. Why? Because you're bringing them right to the Antichrist, because he's going to come right there into Jerusalem. So I'm not sure why you're fulfilling prophecy when you do that again, the prophecy that they would be established and come back to their land again. But I don't know what anybody thinks he's accomplishing by bringing them to Israel, because you are literally just bringing them to the Antichrist front doorstep. Fortunately, God is going to miraculously preserve them, but I just don't see any point in it. Unless you're bringing them out of a place that currently is a bad place, and at least until the end times, Israel might be a safer place. Billy, you got a question about that?
You got a question, sir?
No, he answered that question, Russ.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when the Jewish nation is saved at the end, is that going to only be 144,000?
No, it will be more than that.
That's the witnesses that are out there, 144,000?
Right, yeah.
That's not
Early on. So it will be a lot more than that among the Jews that will be saved.
I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but can you turn a mosque into a temple? Or could you remodel it and have peace in the land and take over the mosque and say we're just completely remodeling and using the bones of it and turn it very quickly in 10 years or 5 years or something into a temple?
I wondered about that, but it would not. I wouldn't think that would be certainly the Jews' first choice. I would think that they wanted to look something like a tabernacle or Solomon's.
In order for peace, quote, we all come together and we make it a temple and we all.
I suppose they could do. I think just to keep the requisites, that they would want a holy place and a holy of holies, as long as they divide it into the 2 rooms, and they've got the menorah and the table showbread.
As big as a mosque, you could easily. I think it would make it quickly happen.
Yeah. So it turned out that they wouldn't even have to build anything. They just So I've sometimes wondered if it's possible, kind of a reverse of what Muslims have done, you know, with Christian churches. Probably the best known example of the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, a famous Christian church that just took over and turned it into a mosque. Well, can we take a mosque and turn it into a temple? You know, so yeah, then they don't even have to build anything. But I imagine they can also build a temple fairly quickly if they got the permission to do it some kind of big event. And again, like I said, if, however it pans out though, whoever can negotiate that deal, yeah, he's definitely going to have some goodwill from the rest of the world. They're going to think this guy is somebody. I mean, who would have thought that somebody could accomplish that?
The heart of the deal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. One more thing and then we'll wrap up here. Let's look at Revelation 13. So when he goes and he declares himself to be God, this is then where he requires everybody to worship him. So again, this is only the midpoint. He's not requiring everybody to worship him for the whole 7 years. That does not start until the midpoint. So again, I think that sometimes people just kind of think of the Antichrist as dominating the 7 years and everybody has to worship him for 7 years. But this is a midpoint thing. And then throughout the remaining, you know, second half of the tribulation. So 13 verses 4 through 6 says they worship the dragon, that would be the devil, which gave power unto the beast, that would be the Antichrist. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, was able to make war with him. Right? I mean, he's got this power because he's been conquering for the last 3.5 years, and now he successfully invaded Israel. And then it continues, says, there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. That's the 3.5 years. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. So at this point is when he requires everybody to worship him. You see again, God gives him that power for 3.5 years. Everybody will worship him except the elect. Those whose names are in the book of life will not worship. But everybody else will. So he will succeed in getting that worship from everybody but the elect. He said he would love to get everybody worshiping him. But that's just not going to happen. And because God's more powerful than him. And God has his elect out there that he's going to save. And he's not going to allow the devil to take them. So, these are key points associated with, I said, the zenith of his power. A few more things happen at this point, but we're out of time tonight, so we're going to wrap it up here, and we'll finish up the Antichrist